New Trottland Yard, Case 5, Silver Cross and Sweet Potato. Dusty was cleaning up after the Foals once again. It came as no surprise that none of them had put away their toys when they were called to the dining hall. She thought the little ones deserved a little happiness in their young lives after ending up in a town that was one big orphanage. Crudena. Way too many ponies died in skirmishes with the griffins, zebras, and the ponies from Saddle Arabia. Why couldn't the council finally negotiate peace with them? Were the gemstones they wanted really that important? Equestria barely used them, and she got the feeling that their government only fought to prove a point. The grey unicorn mare was still thinking that when she spotted an orange tail that stuck out from behind one of the toy chests. Sighing, Dusty trotted over to the hiding foal.
"Still up, Sweet Potato? I've missed you at dinner as well. What's the matter?"
she asked, stepping closer to get a better look at the filly. The foal didn't answer. It was nothing new either, since Sweet had always been a bit of a recluse.
"Ah, come on, Sweet. Come on out of there, please. I gotta go over to the Sunshine Residence and help with the younger ones. Can you come out like a good little filly for me?"
Dusty sing-songed. She knew that Sweet liked her best out of all the orderlies, so she hoped she wouldn't have to drag the filly to bed by her mane. When there was still no answer, Dusty started to get angry. Stepping around the toy chest, Dusty was about to launch into a tirade about responsible young fillies when a lump formed in her throat. Sweet Potato, the young filly with a dark green coat and orange mane, couldn't answer her. The foal's empty amber eyes looked up at Dusty from her bloody face.
"Sweet Potato!"
the unicorn mare screamed. The young Pegasus filly's wings were hanging limply at her sides. To Dusty's eternal relief, the filly's sides were rising and falling shakily. But her pretty face. Some pony had vented a great amount of anger on the filly, and Dusty only hoped she survived the gaping head injury. She almost vomited when she noticed that she could see part of the foal's brain in the fading light. Half a day had passed since Dusty had found Sweet Potato and rushed to the chariot station with her. She had applied first aid as best as she could, wrapping bandages around the foal's head before flying to Las Pegasus with her. The other orderlies had looked at her in shock as they saw her levitating a bleeding foal by her side and running as if Nightmare Moon herself was after her tail, but she couldn't have cared less. The doctors at the hospital had said that the foal had only a very small chance to survive at all, since she had suffered severe brain damage. Even if she survived, she would most likely never be the same little filly she had been before the incident had happened. Right now, Dusty was pacing up and down in front of the operation room. She had been doing that non-stop for the last 12 hours. Her hoofs hurt, her muscles ached, but she just couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes. Dusty was unable to conceive a foal of her own, so she and her husband had considered adopting one. Working in Crudena, she had the perfect opportunity to see how the foals behaved and decide carefully. Sweet had been one of her personal favorite candidates. The quiet filly had been smart, polite, and always helpful. Maybe a little too reclusive, but she had been able to speak up for herself if she had to. Dusty couldn't help but blame herself a little for what had happened. Had she adopted the filly sooner, this might have never happened. But there was another urgent question bothering her. Who had done this? To hurt a foal so bad that it almost died? That seemed quite extreme. She herself had slapped the foal once or twice, but never without reason and never hard. Thinking about the other orderlies that had been on duty with her that night, she could only imagine one pony who could have done it. She had caught him with one of the underage mares of the Peach residence once, but hadn't said anything since the young mare had claimed that he didn't force her. This time, however, she would not only report him, but drag him to the police station herself if she had to. Dusty stomped toward the front door of the Carrot residence where she usually worked. The foals that usually came up to the gentle mare noticed that something was wrong and scrambled away in fear this time. Nurse Gentle Touch was standing in the doorway, waiting for her.
There you are, Dusty. We've been worried sick. What happened to Sweet Potato? Is she all right? By the way, the boss wants to see you.
The Blue Earth Pony mare said in a worried tone of voice. Dusty took a deep breath, trying not to unload her fury on the other mare.
Some pony beat Sweet within an inch of her life. It's still uncertain if she will survive or not, but the doctors didn't give me much hope. And even if she does, she won't ever be the same again. Say, you wouldn't happen to know where Rachel is?
She asked as casually as possible through grit teeth.
Well, I think he's in the kitchen preparing the snacks for the little ones, but I really think you should go see the boss. She sounded as if it was urgent.
Gentle Touch replied, stepping out of the way as Dusty stomped past her without another word. Only a minute later, the door to the kitchen flew open from a burst of magic from her horn. Indeed, there he was with a knife between his teeth. The bulky Earth Pony was cutting fruits with such a ferocity that one could think they had offended him somehow. He turned around to face her, but couldn't complete the motion. A grey field of magic surrounded him, throwing him into one of the kitchen cupboards.
What did you do? Rachel, why did you do it?
Dusty screamed with tears in her eyes. Rage spat the knife out after he extracted himself from the wreckage of the cupboard, seemingly not noticing the cuts on either side of his barrel.
I don't know what you're talking about, you crazy bitch.
He spat, murder in his eyes.
Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
The mare said in a low tone as she advanced on him.
Sweet Potato, you almost killed her.
Almost? Damn it, I thought I'd finished her.
Rage admitted calmly. The statement made Dusty freeze in her tracks. Cold rage began to replace the burning fury that raged through her body. Igniting her horn again, she sent the pink stallion flying. This time he collided with the back door and flew out into the backyard where they usually put up the laundry to dry in the sun.
What's a buck rage?
She screamed as she charged at him with her head lowered. Dusty wanted to impale him on her horn, but she never got the chance. As soon as she was in his range, his left foreleg connected with her horn, breaking it cleanly in two. The mare only had a moment to scream in pain as her horn rolled over the ground before the massive stallion knocked her over. Blood was running down her face and seeping into her eyes. One of the stallion's bulky hoofs connected with her forehead. Once, twice, thrice. When both of her eyes had popped from precise hoof strikes to her eye sockets, her jaw was broken in multiple places and her skull was barely holding together, the stallion stopped his barrage. Rage brought his muzzle close to her ear, starting to whisper.
You want to know why I crushed the little bitch? I consider it your last wish. She found out that I was having a little fun with some of the younger fillies here. She thought I didn't see her when she walked in on me, so she didn't expect a thing when I came up to her. It was really her own fault. She threatened to report me after my first hit, so I had to finish her off. And thank you for making this so easy on me. They won't even be able to charge me for your death because I'll kill you in self-defense,
he whispered in his deep voice. Dusty began to weep silently. She had failed. She had let her own rage overtake her and tried to take on an opponent that was out of her league. Her last thought, before rage brought down both of his front hoofs on her skull, was of Sweet Potato. The wind blew around my muzzle as I soared through the sky in the back of a chariot. Las Pegasus was already visible in the distance and I couldn't wait to get there. After all the commotion of my first two cases and the attack on the yard's headquarters in Canterlot, I really looked forward to this vacation. My boss had even insisted that I took it. Mostly because he didn't want Broken to show up and finish turning the building into rubble, though. If my grin had been any wider, I would have grinned all around my head. A fully paid vacation in one of the most expensive cities in all of Equestria. Was my luck finally turning for the better? We're almost there, miss. It should only take us about 10 minutes to reach the hotel superintendent Graf booked for you. The Pegasus stallion that was pulling my chariot called out to me.
So what was the name of the place again?
I wanted to know. "The Celestia's Pride Hotel, miss. I hear it's one of the better ones in Las Pegasus." It certainly didn't take long to reach the chariot landing platform on the roof of the building. I marveled at the skyscrapers all around us, and especially at the one I was now standing on. All 4 of its sides were beautiful glass fronts, while the rest of it seemed to be made of pure solid gold. A giant sun symbol, almost exactly the same as the one on my cross, adorned the front of it. It was that moment that really showed that I had grown up in a small town. The high society ponies all around that were boarding or disembarking from their own chariots were looking at me in disapproval as I ran to the edge of the roof and stared at the city below. I didn't care about that at all as my muzzle hung open and I squealed in delight. Las Pegasus, the city that never sleeps. A vacation here was a dream come true. No pony at my pay grade could usually afford to stay here, even for a weekend. Taking a look into my saddlebags, I saw the Golden Pony Express card the boss had hoofed over to me. Oh, he would so regret this. My jaw almost hit the ground as I saw the suit the boss had booked for me. It was a presidential suit. The whole thing was as big as the entire house my apartment was in. The bed was big enough for 10 ponies my size, as was a bathtub. A personal bellboy and even a butler were included as well. It was way too good to be true. I worked my way over to the giant flat-screen TV that stood in one corner. I think I drooled a little as I lay down onto the marvelous velvet couch that stood in front of it, and almost jumped out of my skin when I noticed the changeling that sat on the opposite side of it. Its eyes sparkled in a midnight blue light, and a silver cross was hanging from its neck.
"Broken cross,"
I mouthed, unable to speak out of shock, while I sat on my rump with my eyes wide. What the hey did she want here? I really didn't want to wreck this wonderful place while fighting her. Besides, it would have kinda ruined the entire idea of a vacation. She just smiled at me, not moving an inch. "Don't worry, dear brother, I'm not here to harm you. If I were, you would be dead by now. No, my mistress sent me here to extend her congratulations on defeating me and to wish you an enjoyable vacation. All of us have been ordered to leave you alone while you relax, and I don't really understand it, but she wants to beat you at your best. That said, there's also another reason why I'm here. Dancing lost the key when she went back to her time. I would like you to give it to me," she said calmly, helping herself to some of the snacks on the small TV table.
"The key? Why would you want it?"
I blurted out, remembering the key I left back in my apartment in Canterlot. I didn't see any reason to bring it along. Now I regretted that decision.
"Simple. Dancing had something that I want, and I can't get at it without that key. Isn't that obvious, dear brother?"
She sing-songed, a dangerous tone creeping into her voice on those last 2 words.
"I won't give it to you. Had you asked me before you attacked me, then maybe we could have come to an agreement, but as it is, I don't think I would even give you the dirt under my hoofs. Unless it was while I pounded them into your face,"
I retorted, standing up and taking a battle stance.
Now, I told you that I am not here to harm you. It really is a shame that you are not on our side. Dancing and Shadow are so weak. Neither of them could defeat one of us alone. Just imagine what we could do together,"
she began, but I cut her off.
"I saw what will happen if you guys win. I was in Shadow's era, and that is certainly not the future I want for my children."
Broken began to chuckle at that. The sound of it made my mane stand on end.
"Children? You? Don't make me laugh. Before you even get the chance of procreation, you will die by my hoofs. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have more urgent business to attend to."
Broken taunted and shimmered out of existence. It made me worry that she seemed to have the same ability as dancing. My joy over my vacation here had subsided considerably.
"Booyah!"
I shouted as I won the 10th round in the hoof wrestle competition one of the bars nearby was holding this evening. The casino in the lower part of my hotel was too high society for my taste. I had expected a wild party and ponies happily exclaiming that they won. What I had gotten, however, was a bunch of stuck-up snobs who looked at me strangely just because I wasn't wearing a dress. In the end, my personal bellboy, a young Pegasus stallion, had pointed me to this bar. Loud music, interesting company, and drinks that didn't take a whole barrel to get me drunk. That was the kind of thing I preferred.
Who will challenge the unbeatable mare next? She has already proven herself to be stronger than most stallions here, so who will it be?
The barkeeper shouted into his microphone. To my surprise, a very familiar green Pegasus mare sat down on the chair opposite of me. She looked as beautiful as ever as she put her hoof on the table. Her injuries seemed to have healed quite nicely since I couldn't see a single scar. "You have quite the interesting taste, dear brother," Dancing Cross said alluringly, her voice just loud enough for me to hear her. Well, I giggled. I was on my 5th mug of apple whiskey, so I might have been a little drunk. With a low thud, Dancing locked hoofs with me and I knew what would come next. She, of course, knew that the only reason I had won against stallions twice my size was that I was wearing my cross. Unfolding her right wing a bit, she gave me a glance at her own and smirked. The barkeeper was switching into high gear as he announced her as my newest challenger.
Oh, and who do we have here? Since all of you seem to be too afraid to challenge our new champion, another mare has stepped up. Will the newcomer be able to defeat her fellow mare? Who will win? Earth Pony Stubbornness or the Pegasus with her heads in the clouds? Place your bets here at the bar.
He shouted, and I saw that several ponies placed their bets on my victory. After about a minute of that, he began to count down. As soon as the stallion reached 0, we both began to push. My other opponents had lost in mere seconds, but Dancing was putting up quite a fight. Our hoofs didn't move 1 inch as we both pushed with all our might. Suddenly, her eyes flashed a deep pink for a second. I doubt that any pony except myself noticed it, since it was so brief. A second later, my hoof was smashed through the table and all the way to the floor. All customers in the bar went silent at the display of power. Dancing was already fussing over me, noticing that my right foreleg was bent in an odd angle and that my screaming was definitely not a good sign. "Oh dear Celestia, I'm so sorry, oh damn it!" She cursed under her breath while she hefted me onto her back. Dancing wanted to pay my bill for me since I was unable to do much of anything at the moment, but the barkeeper just waved a hoof at her. He told her that all of my expenses had been covered with the bets that had been placed on me. As soon as we left the bar, the cold night air hit me. My sister in destiny didn't stop apologizing all the way to the Las Pegasus General Hospital. Half an hour later, I was limping through the halls of the hospital with my right foreleg in a cast and a detoxification pill in my system. I had been to the restroom about 10 times in the last 10 minutes due to that damn pill, while Dancing was constantly trying to assist me with every step I took. "Enough already, Dancing. I can walk on my own. Besides, it's okay. It was an accident. It's not like you wanted to break my leg, right?" I turned on her, which was a bad idea considering my developing hangover. "But still, I just wanted to show you that our powers are not to be used for such trivial matters. By no means did I want to hurt you," she said weakly, rustling her feathers a bit. Her eyes looked everywhere but at me. Then I remembered something. "Say, Dancing, you lost a key the last time you were here. Broken came to me and wanted to get her hoofs on it. Anything you want to tell me?" I asked. That key. I had meant to give it to you during our last encounter. It is important, and you may not hoof it over to Broken or any of the Nightmare's servants. I can't tell you what it is for yet, but you must keep it safe at all costs. If she gets her hoof on it, then all is lost," she replied cryptically as usual. I wasn't getting anywhere with this, and I knew it. Which was why I decided to ask another question when something collided with my left foreleg and sent me tumbling to the ground. When I raised my head again, with Dancing's help I must admit, I saw a frightened filly that was hiding behind me. Her head was wrapped in bandages, but I couldn't believe my eyes nonetheless. Other than the bandages and her age, she was a spitting image of Dancing Cross. A stallion came galloping down the hallway towards us, and the filly did her best to hide behind me completely.
"Come on now, Potato, we've got to get back to the orphanage,"
the stallion growled. It didn't work. All it did was that the filly tried to get under me to hide between my legs. When he noticed that, the Earth pony reached out a hoof to pull the filly away, only to have it knocked aside by a swish of my tail. "Hoofs off, Buster. That filly obviously doesn't want to go with you, so buzz off," I said, glaring down the stallion. Dancing couldn't take her eyes off of the filly that had now wriggled herself completely under me. It was hard for me to keep my balance, since one of my legs was out of order for the moment, but I was unwilling to show any kind of weakness.
"Look, that filly is in the orphanage I work in. They sent me here to pick her up. So now step aside, bitch, and let me do my job,"
he said, attempting to grab the filly once again. My neck snapped backwards and I dug around in my saddlebags with my muzzle. A quick search later, I was holding my badge between my teeth. Speaking around it, I said, "No can do. Now back off. I'm with the new Trottland yard and I'm hereby taking this filly into protective custody," I stated matter-of-factly. The pink stallion backed off a little, his face going pale.
"You'll regret this, bitch. You'll have to answer to my boss for this,"
he threatened when Dancing stepped between the two of us. Threatening a yard inspector and calling her names? Dear sir, that is an offense that is punishable by at least 3 years in the mines, according to paragraph 459, section B of the Equestrian Book of Law. She lectured him. The massive stallion seemed to ponder that for a moment before shooting me a look and disappearing down the hallway again. After Dancing had helped me to extract the filly from between my legs, she was now sleeping peacefully on my back. She hadn't stopped shivering until the stallion had disappeared around a corner, so I could only guess that she was afraid of him. I was currently sitting in the doctor's office, the filly still on my back. Dancing had disappeared somewhere again, so I didn't have any backup in this situation. "Okay, Doc, can you tell me about this filly on my back? The stallion that came to get her seemed to be quite the brute," I said, pointing at the filly with my good hoof. The doctor fidgeted a little before answering me. I'm sorry, Inspector, but there's not much I can tell you. All I know is that she was brought here 4 months ago with a serious head injury. Some ponies seem to have tried to beat her to death. We treated her as best as we could and achieved a certain level of recovery. She did, however, suffer some brain damage that prevents her from speaking. Tests showed that her ability to think has also been affected. My co-workers and I are in agreement that she will most likely never be able to live a normal life again. The long-term effects are unknown yet, but we think she will need special care for the rest of her life," the elder unicorn stallion explained. "You still haven't told me her name, Doc. That stallion called her Potato, but I doubt that this is it." "Her full name is Sweet Potato Pie, but the mare that brought her in just called her Sweet or Sweet Potato." "So do you have any idea why that mare didn't come to pick her up? I mean, that this guy's actually working in an orphanage seems hard to believe," I said, looking back at the filly sleeping on my back. Walking on 3 legs with the additional weight on my back was tricky, but I managed somehow. "Well, you see, as far as I know, she's dead. She attacked one of her co-workers and was killed in the fight. I've seen the body myself, and I can tell you that she didn't look good. If you ask me, she was beaten to death on purpose, but the police here labeled this as self-defense," the old stallion said in a hushed tone, as if the walls were listening to every word he said. I put my hoof on my chin as my thoughts started to race through my head. This filly had been severely injured and crippled because of it. A mare that had brought her here and had attacked one of her co-workers, getting killed in the fight. This sounded more than fishy. A mare that brought an injured filly to the hospital personally, instead of waiting for the ambulance, painted the picture of a mare that cared. It didn't fit a mare that would get involved in a fight to the death for no reason. Then there was this big stallion that had wanted to pick up the filly earlier. He was certainly strong enough to inflict such injuries and didn't seem like the cuddling type either. A sigh erupted from my muzzle as I caught myself already considering to investigate this case.
vacation without causing a ruckus.
Gruff tone reprimanded me as I called him from my suit while the filly was sleeping on my bed. Ever since she had curled up on my back, she hadn't woken up once. My boss wasn't very happy about me wanting to investigate this case, but there wasn't much he could do about it. After a long while of explaining, discussion, and actually begging, Superintendent Gruff Tone actually gave me all necessary authorizations. Sweet Potato was now officially in protective custody. He would call the local police station ordering them to support me in any way they could. He was unusually forthcoming when he even allowed me to stay in the suit. After the call was over, I looked over to the filly again. She had her eyes open and was silently watching me. It was creeping me out a little, but there was nothing I could do about it. She didn't cringe away from me when I wobbled to the bed and lay next to her. All she did was follow my every movement. I wanted to check something that I had brought along with me on my vacation, which was now officially over, when a small snout buried itself in my side. The little Pegasus filly was cuddling up to me, careful not to touch my injured right leg, as she curled up there, her amber eyes fixed on mine, and I just couldn't help but smile a little. Instinctively, my tail wrapped around her and I started to stroke her mane carefully with my right hoof. As long as I moved it slowly, I didn't feel any pain while doing so. Sweet Potato rested her head on the right side of my barrel and soon dozed off again. When I was sure that she was fast asleep, I pulled out the folder my boss had given me, reading it for what felt like the millionth time. I had to memorize every detail if I wanted to do something about it. Somehow I just knew that telling Dancing how she would die wouldn't be enough. I needed to be there and do something about it. The next morning I ordered a big breakfast after Sweet had pointed at her muzzle with a hoof. She was certainly incapable of speaking and didn't seem to understand most of what I said, but as long as I was in her sight, she stayed calm for some reason. Only once did I leave her alone, when I had to go to the little filly's room. It was a mistake that I would never commit again. The otherwise slow-moving filly had wrecked part of the room in her panicked search for me. Even when she had to go later, I had to stay in front of the open door, facing the other way. It was starting to dawn on me that I might have bitten off more than I could chew. Carrying Sweet Potato on my back while she had her forelegs and chin on my head and observed everything that was going on around us, I walked into Crudena. Several of the ponies were looking at me strangely, and some even disappeared into the buildings once they saw me. I couldn't blame them. I must have looked like a Grim Reaper pony to them, wearing a 9mm pistol on each of my forelegs and an assault rifle strapped to my left side. I felt uneasy coming here armed that way, since it was still an orphanage, but the boss had insisted on it. My broken right leg had been put into a sheath to make it possible for me to walk normally, at the cost of great pain later. He had also insisted on the 3 constables that were walking in line behind me. All 3 of them were unicorns, so I couldn't help but think that they were here to restrain me just as much as any potential suspect. The little town of Crudena was completely run by orderlies and orphans, financed by donations and government funding. I could clearly see that this was the case, seeing how run down many of the buildings looked. It only then hit me that there were hundreds, if not thousands of orphans here in Equestria, and all of them were shipped here for an eventual adoption. I couldn't fathom how growing up like that must be for these folks. It was that moment that I really appreciated the fact that I had grown up with both parents. I was standing in the office of the mayor running this place. A pink earth pony mare with a yellow mane by the name of Rough Buck. I could clearly see a resemblance between her and the stallion that had tried to pick up Sweet from the hospital. It was something worth investigating. I believe that is one of our foals you have on your head there. Thanks for bringing her back, even though I dare say that she didn't need an armed escort like that. You could have just hoofed her over to my son. The mare said, extending a hoof towards Sweet, who shrank back to hide behind my head. Her mentioning her son also confirmed my earlier deduction.
This filly is clearly scared of you, Miss Ruff, and she is scared of your son. Seeing as your son didn't look nor acted like he would handle her with the appropriate level of love and kindness, I took her into protective custody, and before you say anything else, she will remain in our custody until I deem it safe to release her. But that is not why I'm here. I'm here to investigate the injuries this filly suffered, as well as the murder of a mare named Dusty, I clarified. The mare sat down behind her desk again, putting her hoofs together in front of her face. Miss Dusty's death was regrettable, but it was an accident. She attacked my son and he defended himself, easy as that. As for this filly's injuries, I doubt that it's anything to worry about. She certainly seems to be alright. Must have been a simple fight between kids. You wouldn't believe how often we get something like that here. You might doubt my suspicions, but your opinion is not what matters here, is it? I've been in a fair amount of fights in my youth, and I can tell you that a fight between kids usually ends when one is crying or when blood flows. The other thing is that no filly or colt her age would have the strength to beat her like that, I argued, feeling a rage well up in me as sweat began to shiver on my back. And one more thing. What triggered the attack on your son? What did he do to make a mare that could be my mother to attack him? She surely wasn't in best condition. According to her medical report, she had beginning arthritis and her magic was impaired by a rare kind of internal horn rot, making her horn hollow from the inside and disturbing her magical circuit. You want to tell me that a mare that felt pain each time she used magic or moved fast willingly attacked a young and capable stallion like your son? I elaborated, and I could see her grimace behind her hoofs. It was like a spoon of honey for my mood. So you won't return custody of this foal to us and insist on sniffing around this place? She finally asked after a moment of silence, to which I nodded. It brought a grin to her face that made my mane stand on end. Very well. You may investigate in this place, but in case of that filly you have also to abide by our rules. Paragraph 9, Section 3 of our orphanage's rules declare that, should you keep the foal for more than 48 hours, you agree to adopt her. Unless, of course, you want to return her to us after all, she said, the grin never leaving her face. I gulped. She had me there. I knew about that rule before Hoof, but hadn't prepared for her pulling that card on me. I took a final look back at the filly that was shivering on my back and sighed. I was really too soft for my own good. Okay, where do I sign? I simply asked, and her jaw dropped. Rough Buck apparently hadn't expected that response from me. She began to sputter, and her muzzle opened and closed a few times before she had collected herself enough to speak. Are you even aware of what you are saying, Miss Cross? She's disabled and will most likely never be able to live on her own. Adopting her will be a lifelong commitment. And what happens if you get killed during your work at the yard? She will simply end up here again, even more broken than she is now. She tried to reason with me. And you wouldn't be able to convince any pony to adopt her anyway, would you? I mean, who would willingly adopt a disabled foal? She would cost your institution a whole load of bits until she would be old enough to be sent to an insane asylum. Well, I'm telling you, that won't happen. She obviously doesn't want to stay here, and I seem to be the only pony she is comfortable to be around. Therefore, you won't be able to talk me out of it. Now, if you would be so kind, I clarified, leaving no room for argument. I was quite aware that she had a point. Whenever I was sent out to investigate a case, I ran the risk of being shot. Not only that, but Broken and the Nightmare were still after my head as well. But I was quite sure that, if something happened to me, my parents would take Sweet in. Seeing that she had no way to talk me out of it, the mare produced the necessary papers out of one of her desk drawers. About 10 minutes later, I left her office not with the victim I had in protective custody, but with my new daughter. That night, I didn't sleep in my luxurious suite in the Celestial Pride Hotel. Instead, I slept in the guest house of Crudena, with Sweet at my side. The 3 constables had not left for home either, even though I would have preferred it that way. 2 of them patrolled the town while the 3rd stood in front of my door. I just hoped they did get some rest themselves. I had a dream that night. It was a very strange one, for I had never been in the Canterlot Council building. I could only imagine that this was how it had looked during the Alicorn's rule.
I was standing in the middle of a really big room which had walls that were made out of white marble. At the far wall were 3 thrones that looked like they were lined with red silk. On the left one sat a dark blue mare, her mane sparkling like the night sky. I was in awe at her beauty as she stood up and came trotting up to me. She moved with such elegance and grace that it stunned me. When she had reached me, I noticed her cutie mark of a crescent moon. "We commend thee, Silver Cross. It took our previous bearer almost 2 years to come here for the first time," she said as she looked down on me. I was used to other ponies being bigger than me, but this mare was freaking huge. My muzzle hanging wide open must have been an indication of my confusion and awe. The mare waved her hoof in front of my face a few times, trying to get my attention.
"Huh? What? Oh, sorry, never seen an Alicorn before. Or at least never a full-sized one,"
I apologized, falling down onto my haunches.
"It does not matter. Thee have gained our attention, little one, and that is why we brought thee here,"
she said with a gentle smile on her face.
"Excuse me, how did I gain your attention? I didn't do anything special,"
I argued, cocking my head in confusion. The Alicorn in front of me lay down to be on eye level with me and began to chuckle softly.
"Thee has done something extraordinary. Thee has taken in a filly even though thee knew it would mean a lot of trouble for thee in the future. We approve of that. During our rule we had many duties. Besides raising the moon and wandering the dreams of our subjects, we also wandered the dark streets of our realm and looked for lost children and see them safely home. Vampires and other demons are no new thing in Equestria either. More than once did we have to fight them, and we invented powerful means to do so. We brought thee here to grant you one of those powers. Thee may choose," she elaborated, summoning several dark blue orbs with her horn. Each of them showed an image of something. There were 8 orbs floating in front of me, and the Alicorn in front of me only nodded reassuringly. A dark sword, a dark spear, some kind of strange dark globe, a picture of 2 identical ponies, a pony seemingly running very fast, a pony lifting a boulder. A dark shield and a pair of amber eyes were depicted on the orbs. The Alicorn of the night didn't offer any explanation of what they meant, even when I asked her. Putting a hoof to my chin in thought, I began to ponder my options. I could identify at least 2 of the orbs easily, having seen Shadow use those powers in battle. The spear surely stood for the shadow spears she fired at Broken Cross in rapid succession, while the dark globe was most likely the symbol for the quite useful Shadow Walk, an ability with which Shadow Cross had been able to appear and disappear at will. As far as I understood it, it was some kind of teleportation, only that it didn't have a range limit like the regular version. 2 more began to make sense in my mind. The pony lifting a boulder could have been the trait Dancing had used to beat me in the hoof wrestle contest and break my leg in the process, while the running pony could be the one giving Broken her freakish speed. I certainly wasn't good at choosing, seeing as I found pros and contras for each of the powers that I had already identified, but I was also intrigued by the ones that made no sense to me yet. So, to stall, I asked the question. "Say, I fought a changeling named Broken Cross. She had similar powers like the ones you're offering me, so—" "Don't worry, Broken Cross does not have my cross. There are abilities all of them share, however. If our sister would decide to see you, she would offer you a few of these as well. If you took 2 of the same, that one trait would be twice as powerful, since it would be powered by 2 of us instead of only 1.
She explained, still smiling. I sighed.
"Okay, look, I kinda can't stop thinking about you as Alicorn of the Night or that Alicorn. Before we go on, can you tell me your name?"
I asked, still playing for time.
"Most certainly. Thee may call us Luna if thou wishes to do so."
Luna. Now I knew for certain that I was in the actual presence of one of the legendary Alicorns. That left Celestia, Cadence, and their prophet Twilight Sparkle.
"One last question before I decide."
"Go ahead."
"Can I have 2 of them instead of 1?
I asked sheepishly. Luna seemed a little taken aback at that, but started laughing nonetheless. Zoe's predecessor was afraid of us, yet Zoe talks to us as if we were just another pony. We like that. Just this once we will grant Zoe's wish. She chuckled. I grinned widely, pointing my hoof at two of the orbs that were still floating in front of me. The one with the running pony and the dark sword began to float towards me, disappearing into my body. Zoe have shown bravery tonight and great compassion during the day. We are quite sure that we will meet again soon. To activate the powers we have just gave Zoe, think of their symbols. Train to use them and never use them for trivial matters, or we might decide to take them from you again. She said, blurring out of existence even while she spoke. It was still dark when my eyes fluttered open. A quick glance at the digital alarm clock on the nightstand revealed to me that it was 6 in the morning. I reached over a hoof to where I expected Sweet to be, but she wasn't there. My eyes looked around frantically, and finally I found her at the window, staring outside.
What are you, sweetie?
I yawned, standing up and trotting over to her side. She pointed outside with one of her wings, and I saw a bulky figure move around in the shadows. The constables that I had brought with me were nowhere to be seen. My mane stood on end instantly, and my brain jolted to full wakefulness.
Sweetie, can you stay here alone for a bit? I have to check this out,
I whispered into her ear. The filly looked at me fearfully before hugging my good leg. Sighing, I lay down on the floor so she could climb up onto my back. It probably wasn't the smartest move to take her along, but I couldn't leave her alone either. Sneaking out into the darkness, I noticed something very odd. The sky was full of clouds, hiding the moon behind them, yet I could see as clearly as if on a sunny day. Darting from shadow to shadow, I followed the bulky figure whom I soon identified to be the orphanage's manager's son, Rachel. He sneaked into one of the side buildings, and soon the light inside was turned on. I stayed in the shadows, observing the whole thing. Sweet Potato was shivering on my back. If it was due to fear or the early morning cold, I couldn't tell. I took off the jacket that said New Trottland Yacht Inspector on its back and put it over her. The shivering eased a little but didn't go away entirely. I just hoped that she would be okay. If it came to a fight, I would have to leave her behind. Not only would she be in the way, but she would also be in danger if I brought her along for something like that. About half an hour after Rach had entered the building, several young fillies came there as well. They looked like they were anticipating something fun and were chatting in low voices that I couldn't make out from where I was. When all of them were inside, I decided it was time to take a closer look. Creeping closer, I took a look through the window. What I saw made my jaw drop. Rachel, that total brute of a stallion, was dancing around in a tutu, while the young fillies stood on one side of the room and mirrored his motions.
Ballet lessons? Really?
I couldn't help but exclaim aloud. The whole group of ponies turned towards the window, and I could see the expression on Rachel's face darken. A moment later, he was already galloping for the front door. I turned and ran as fast as I could towards the nearest building. Opening the door, I put down Sweet and told her to stay where she was. She only looked up at me with her teary amber eyes as I closed the door and locked it behind me. To my surprise, the tutu-wearing stallion was already right behind me when I turned around again. I got a hoof to the face that stunned me for just a second, which wasn't enough for the stallion to land another hit on me. Luna's words came into my mind, and I thought about the symbol depicting a running pony. The world around me started to slow down as if everything was moving in slow motion. I myself could still move normally, however. Dodging the blow, I landed a hit of my own, and time started to flow normally again. Rage flew several meters through the air before impacting on a tree and knocking it over. He seemed more than just stunned. He seemed to be quite out of it. The 3 constables took care of Rachel once they had finally noticed the ruckus I had caused. It turned out that he was giving regular early morning ballet lessons to little fillies and colts in the orphanage under the condition that they kept quiet about it. Being worried about his reputation, it was his worst nightmare when he had seen Sweet Potato standing at the same window I had seen him through. When he had tried to talk to her about it, he had, not to my surprise, tried to intimidate her, which she hadn't taken well. Threatening to report his behavior and spreading the word that he was not as tough as he always claimed to be, the filly had sealed her fate. He had seen no other option than to beat her to death, while the other fillies and colts sat at the dinner table. Since that was in another building entirely, no pony had been able to hear her scream. Then, when Dusty had confronted him about it, he had feared that Sweet had told her what she had seen, and so he had killed her too. The orphanage's manager was raging at me when we all left, promising me revenge for doing that to her lovely son. I could only shake my head as my daughter was hovering next to me.
I didn't do anything to your son, miss. He did it to himself. Had he been true about his passion for ballet and teaching, nothing of this would have happened, were my last words before trotting away, Sweet Potato flying at my side. The filly had not left me ever since I had unlocked the door again, and I promised myself to never leave her alone again if I could help it.
Okay, and here, every pony, are my questions for you. What do you think about the case in its entirety? What do you think about, well, Silver preferring to party at a bar, where the drinks are hard, the company is interesting, and, well, there's a hoof wrestle contest going on, instead of partying or trying to party in a place with snobby ponies? Then my next question would have been, what do you think about the whole thing with Rachel and how he reacts to being discovered as a ballet teacher? Not to mention my question to you, what do you think about sweet potato pie? No, I don't mean the dish, I mean the pony. Okay, that joke aside, do you think that Silver did the right thing here by adopting her? Will she be able to take care of a disabled filly? I mean, she can't speak, and her ability to think clearly is affected, and she doesn't seem to understand most of what Silver is telling her, so, yeah. Will Silver be able to care for her appropriately, or has she bitten off more than she can chew? Sincerely yours, Visual Pony.